There's a new drone from the United States that's already making Russia anxious. And what's surprising is that it's not the super advanced and super expensive weapon you might expect. It's not a hypersonic missile, nor is it a laser or any other high-tech million-dollar weapon. In fact, it's the opposite. It's simple and cheap. Its name is Lucas, a drone made to attack, hit its target, and complete its mission. But even though it's simple, it has a unique capability that could change the course of the battle, especially in Ukraine. And that's the reason why Russia is uneasy. If you think about it, this kind of drone isn't new. Russia also has its own version that's almost the same. But Lucas is different. This was made by SpectreWorks, a company in Arizona that develops new military tech, especially in drones and unmanned systems. This drone was first used in real combat on February 28, when the US and Israel began their operation against Iran. It was shown to the public earlier in July, then showcased again in December. But even though it had been seen before, its importance wasn't immediately noticed. At first glance, it just looked like an ordinary drone. It's grouped with inexpensive drones like Coyote, Roadrunner, and Switchblade. That means it doesn't look different or have a unique basic function. But the truth is, it's not about the appearance, it's about the price. According to Tim Hawkins, a Lucas only costs around $35,000. Now compare that to other equipment used by the US. The Tomahawk missile costs around $2 million. The Patriot missile costs around $4 million. The Jasmer costs around $1.2 million. Even the Switchblade drone costs around $120,000. But the Lucas only costs $35,000. That means just in terms of price, it already has a big advantage. And because it's cheap, the US can afford to make a lot of them. It's faster to replace when supplies run out. And it's not heavy on the budget, even if used repeatedly. This is where the problem becomes clear for Russia. In modern warfare, it's no longer practical to use an extremely expensive missile to shoot down a cheap drone. It's like spending millions to destroy something that only costs thousands. You're at a loss right away. And this is exactly what was seen in Ukraine. As the battle goes on, the cost of defense becomes much higher than the cost of attack. So even though Lucas's concept isn't new, its real strength doesn't come from being advanced. It's in being simple, cheap, and easy to mass produce. And remember this, we haven't even talked about the most important reason why Russia is afraid of it. That's where their real problem will start. If you just look at it on the surface, it seems like the most unusual thing. For Lucas, it's not really about its power or speed. The truth is, what's most interesting here is how it was made. Because it's rare for the United States to copy a design from the enemy. But in this case, that's exactly what happened. Lucas is based on an Iranian drone known as the Shahed 136. And if you think about it, it's kind of ironic. Because in the past, Iran was the one who often copied from other countries, especially the US and Israel. As early as the 1970s, Iran copied a US anti-tank missile to make their own version. By 2006, they also made a more advanced missile using a design they got from Israel, after Hezbollah obtained it in Lebanon. Not only that, Iran also has drones that were made based on an American drone that ended up in their hands in 2011. This means Iran has been doing this for a long time. They take existing technology, then modify it to make their own version. And one of the most well-known results of this is the Shahed 136. It is believed that this drone also comes from an older design from Israel, which in turn originated from a design from Germany. It's like a chain of copying and improving, but now the situation has reversed. The US is now the one taking ideas from Iran. They used the Shahed 136 as a base to create the Lucas. And it became even more interesting because the first use of the Lucas in real combat was actually against Iran itself. It's like using the enemy's own idea against them. In May 2025, Donald Trump even said that the Shahed is good and cheap, fast, and deadly. He even questioned why the US couldn't make that kind of drone, but it looks like they've found a way. There's a possibility that they got an intact or nearly intact Shahed from Ukraine. Then they studied it and made their own version. For several years, thousands of Shahed drones have been used by Russia against Ukraine since 2022. And even though Ukraine shot down many of them, there were some that they recovered intact. That's where the idea started, and the result was the Lucas. They have almost the same concept. In fact, the first version of this was even called FLM 136. That's clearly a reference to the Shahed 136. When it comes to specs, it's not really that different. The Lucas can fly up to around 444 nautical miles, and it can stay in the air for up to 6 hours. It can carry a load of around 40 pounds, and its speed is around 74 knots, which can go up to 105 knots. In other words, it's almost the same as the Shahed and the Russian version, the Juran. And in some aspects, its performance is even lower. So if we're just talking about specs, this isn't what Russia is afraid of. There's a deeper reason. And that's where the most important feature of the Lucas comes in, the one that's really giving them a hard time. For example, when Iran first showcased the Shahed 136 in 2021, it can fly for approximately 940 to 1,240 miles. That means it's 2 to 3 times farther compared to the first version of Lucas. Russia also didn't fall behind. They made a more advanced version from their large factory in Alabuga. This includes the Juran 3, which is faster and newer. In other words, this kind of drone is not new to Russia. Since 2022, it is estimated that around 50,000 Shahed and Juran drones have been used by them against Ukraine. They are very experienced in this kind of warfare. So the question is, if they are already familiar with this kind of drone, why are they suddenly worried about Lucas? The answer is simple. Starlink, this is where everything changes. When the news came out that the US was already using the Lucas against Iran, some Russian military bloggers immediately released their analysis. They studied the video released by the Pentagon last December, where the Lucas was tested from the U.S. Navy ship USS Santa Barbara. There, they noticed a small box on top of the drone. This wasn't just part of the drone's design. It's a device used to connect to Starlink or even the more advanced Starshield. And this is where Russia started to get nervous. According to Rybar, what they feared has already happened. Drones like Lucas have already been equipped with Starlink. That's why it can now be controlled from anywhere in the world while flying. This means its connection doesn't just get lost easily. The guidance continues until the last second before hitting the target. The strike is more accurate, the movement is more controlled, and it's harder to stop. Starlink is not new in this fight. Ukraine has been using this for a long time for communication on the battlefield. In 2025, Russia also tried to use this for their own drones, but it was suddenly cut off. What happened was their communication became chaotic, their coordination weakened, and some of their operations stopped. Here you can see how important connection is in this kind of battle, especially for drones, because drones rely on signals to reach their targets. When the signal is lost, the direction is also lost. It can get lost, it can crash, or even be captured by the enemy. That's why the most common way to stop a drone is to block its signal. This is what both sides are doing in Ukraine. But this is where Lucas is different. Because it uses Starlink, its signal can't be easily cut off. And no matter what the enemy does, it will still make it to its target. And this is the real reason why Russia fears it even more. When a drone signal is cut off or disrupted, it loses its direction. It can fail to hit its target, just crash to the ground, or worse, be captured by the enemy and used against its owner. That's why in today's battles, one of the most important things both sides do is to block the signals of drones. Most drones, especially FPV and one-way attack drones, rely on GPS to reach their targets. On the Russian side, they have their own version called GLONASS. Because of this, both Ukraine and Russia have become experts at blocking these signals. Every day, they improve their methods to disrupt the connection of enemy drones. According to Serhiy Beskresnov, also known as Flash, Russia has already acquired almost every type of drone used by Ukraine. And according to him, Russia studied every detail of these, from electronics and connectivity to navigation. This means they know exactly how to weaken them. But this is where the battle changes, because when a drone uses Starlink, it's a different story. According to Russian military bloggers, it's harder to bring down this kind of drone compared to those that only use GPS. And the reason is simple: signal. GPS and others like it come from satellites that are extremely far from Earth, about 12,500 miles high, and there aren't that many of these satellites either. This means that by the time the signal reaches the ground, it's already weak. And because it's weak, it's easier to disrupt. If you emit a stronger signal on the same frequency, the GPS signal gets drowned out. When that happens, the drone loses its guidance. And that's where the problem starts. With the length of the front lines in Ukraine, you don't need a lot of big equipment to do this. All you need is enough devices that can disrupt the signal, and you spread them out in different locations. This is what Russia did. They used mobile systems like the R-330 ZGTL Krasuka 4 and RB-341 V Lear 3. And honestly, this was effective. They were able to bring down drones and even missiles that use GPS, like the JDAM. They were also affected. But Ukraine isn't falling behind either. They constantly change the frequency of their drones so they can't be detected easily. Russia does this too. So what happens is it's like a continuous chase. Sometimes one side has the advantage. Then the other side adjusts. It goes on and on. It's a never-ending battle. But even with this situation, there's one thing that's slowly becoming clear. When Starlink is used, it becomes harder for Russia to control the battle. According to a Russian commander named Shtuganov, this is what's happening in the battle. He said the enemy is playing with the frequency. That's why we also adjust our system. When they try to disrupt us, we switch to another frequency. It means it's like a game of tag. One side makes a move, the other responds. And they're able to do this because the old satellites like GPS and GLONASS use weak signals. But when it comes to Starlink, that's a different story. This is where Russia faces a big problem. Right now, they still don't have a clear way to stop it. And it doesn't look like this will be easy to solve even in the coming years. Why? Because Starlink works differently compared to other systems. GPS satellites are very far from Earth, but Starlink is much closer. It orbits around the Earth at a height of around 341 miles. And it's not just one or two satellites. Right now, there are more than 10,000 Starlink satellites in orbit. This number was reached on March 17, 2026, after sending a new batch of satellites using the Falcon 9 rocket from California. In total, more than 11,000 have been launched since 2019. And these satellites are extremely fast. They reach almost 17,000 miles per hour. As they orbit, they form a kind of network that wraps around the entire world. This means that almost wherever you are, there's a signal. Now here, this is where adversaries like Russia or China encounter two major problems. First, a Starlink device doesn't just connect to a single satellite, it keeps switching. As the satellites move above, the connection continuously switches to different satellites. At every moment, the source of the signal changes. This means it's not enough to just disrupt a single signal. You have to chase a moving target that's also inside a network that's moving as well. Second, Starlink's signal is stronger compared to GPS. Because it's closer to Earth, the signal received is more complete and clearer. So if you want to block it, you need more powerful equipment. Yes, it's possible to disrupt a connection if there's only one target, but it's a different story when you're up against an entire network. Imagine there are over 10,000 satellites orbiting and they're moving really fast. This is no longer a simple problem. It's not enough to just put a single truck with equipment on the front lines. You need a lot of much more powerful devices working all at once. And even if you do that, it's still difficult because the Starlink signal keeps moving and changing, and you can't immediately catch where it's going to come from in the next second. In other words, this isn't just a problem. It's a huge challenge that up to now, Russia still doesn't have a clear answer for on how to deal with it. The problem is, It takes a huge amount to make this happen, and honestly, Russia is still far from having the capability to do this now and even in the coming years. To understand how difficult this is, some Chinese researchers created a simulation. They looked at how much equipment would be needed to weaken Starlink around Taiwan. The result was extremely high. At least 935 powerful devices would be needed, all operating at the same time, to completely affect the signal. And if weaker ones are used, it would take almost 2,000 drones with the same equipment. Now, put that into perspective. The length of the front line there is between 500 to 750 miles. That means if Russia were to copy this setup, they would need thousands of pieces of equipment spread out along the entire line just to achieve basic coverage. And the problem doesn't end there. They also need to protect their own vast country against drones that can reach distant areas using Starlink. This is where you can see how difficult the situation is. It's almost impossible. It gets even harder because of the way Starlink transmits its signal. It's not just a single frequency. Its signal spreads across many frequencies and keeps switching. That means if you try to disrupt one part of the signal, there's a big chance you won't hit anything but just noise. And even if you bring a lot of equipment and enough power to cover the whole signal, there's another problem. It still has a security layer. The connection has its own key or code that only the system knows. Without it, you can't guess how the signal moves. And of course, this kind of information isn't just given away. In short, Russia's current capabilities are far from enough to handle this. They need more, stronger, and more advanced equipment than anything they've used in Ukraine. And the cost? It could reach hundreds of billions of dollars. For a country already struggling to fund its current war, this is almost impossible to achieve. On top of that, there's another problem. The equipment they use to disrupt signals is easy to detect. Because it also emits a signal, it becomes a target for Ukraine's drones, missiles, and artillery. According to Oryx Spion Corp, at least 94 of these Russian devices have been destroyed since 2000. So it's not enough for them to just make a lot. They also need to keep them operational while they're in use. And that's the harder part. The situation will get even worse if the US uses not only Starlink, but also Starshield. Starshield is a more advanced version made by SpaceX for the US military in 2022. According to the company, it has higher security and is harder to breach or disrupt, and its satellites are directly controlled by the US government. This means that if Russia is already having a hard time with just Starlink, they'll have an even harder time when they're up against Starshield. As of now, Starshield has no less than 183 special satellites. Its security is higher. It also has the capability to observe the ground, and it can carry different tools while using the Starlink connection. This means it doesn't just provide internet. More secure, smarter, and harder to tamper with. Now imagine if this is attached to drones like Lucas. Russia's problem will get even worse. It will be harder to disrupt the signal. It's more expensive to make, and it's almost impossible to stop. Its security is tighter, access is more controlled, and the signal can't be easily faked. But the problem doesn't end there. It gets even worse, because Russia shouldn't just worry about Lucas. This kind of connection can be attached to almost all US drones and missiles, as long as the design allows it. This means that even Tomahawk missiles or HIMARS can have this kind of control. And if that happens, that's a whole new level. According to the Russian engineer, all long-range weapons can now be controlled from anywhere in the world, and they can hit with extreme precision. It's like just sending them through a window. He added that this is not just a simple improvement, this is a major change. It's a change in the way of warfare. And honestly, it's hard to argue with what he said. Now the question is, what can Russia do? There have long been talks that they are finding ways to take down satellites. But even if they have this kind of capability, there's still a big problem. There are so many Starlink satellites, and they move very fast. According to Dmitry Konanikin, Forget about the old idea that you can clear orbit with simple methods. That might work for hundreds of satellites, but not for thousands. And that's where the biggest issue comes in. Right now, there's still no clear solution. And the anxiety is really being felt. Rybar is calling for immediate action to destroy the thousands of Starlink satellites. But the question is, where will the funding come from? There's no clear answer. Meanwhile, according to Obsessed with War, if there is still no solution against this network within a year, the outcome will be very bad for us. However, Russia is still doing something. They are trying to find a way to affect the Starlink signal. In 2024, there were reports that Ukraine's connection was temporarily lost. According to them, it is possible that Russia is trying different ways to disrupt it. There was also information that came out about a system called Tobol. It was originally made to protect Russia's own satellites, but now it is possibly also being used to block the enemy's signal. Aside from that, they are also developing a more advanced system called Kalinka. Its purpose is to detect and disrupt Starlink's connection to affect Ukraine's drones and communications. But even with these measures, one thing is still clear: Russia is still lagging behind. According to Andrei Beshchukov, who leads the Russian Center for Unmanned Systems and Technologies, what they call the Starlink killer can reportedly detect terminals connected to Starshield. But for now, there is still no certainty if this will really work. It still needs to be tested in real combat. And it's also possible that this could end up with the same problems experienced by other Russian equipment. So while there is still no clear answer, it seems that Russia and China are taking a different direction. The idea is simple. If you can't stop it, make your own version. Now, both of them are rushing to create their own version similar to Starlink. Russia is creating its own network called Zorky. They plan to start making terminals in 2026, and they aim to launch more than 300 satellites by 2027. On China's side, the plan is even bigger. Aside from developing ways to destroy satellites using lasers and microwaves, they are also building their own large networks in space. One of these is Tianfan, or Thousand Sails, which already has almost 100 satellites and aims to reach 15,000. They have another project called Guowang, or SatNet, which is currently being tested and plans to reach 13,000 satellites. And there's also Honghu 3, which is still in the planning stage but is expected to reach around 10,000 satellites when completed. On the other side, the U.S. is also keeping up. The United States Space Force has systems capable of disrupting enemy satellite communications, such as the counter-communication system, Meadowland system, and remote modular terminal. But there is one clear direction in all of this. As the systems improve, technology plays a bigger role in the conflict. Because of this, the old ways of defense and attack are no longer enough. They need to keep up with the pace of change. If not, they'll be left behind. Now, it's clear that the conflict is no longer just about strength, but about who is more prepared for the new way of warfare. In this kind of conflict, the way we view a country's strength is also changing. It's no longer just about the number of weapons or the size of the budget, but about how quickly they can keep up with new technology. Those who are more ready to adjust have a better chance of gaining the upper hand. And as the situation becomes more complicated, being prepared for what might happen becomes even more important.